Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. My name is Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me here for the latest episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and subscribe to my channel at Kevin Gray Sports. You can follow me on Twitter as well at Kevin Gray Sports. The Mavericks get their biggest comeback win of the season after overcoming a 22-point deficit to the Houston Rockets to win in overtime 147-136 as Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving combined for 85 points in the victory. Kyrie Irving with 48 points, 19 of which coming in the fourth quarter. Luka Doncic pouring in 37. Dante Exum, the hero of today's game, knocking down the three-pointer at the buzzer in the fourth quarter to send the game in the overtime. PJ Washington was able to help the Mavericks take care of things in that overtime period, scoring 8 of his 14 points in OT, knocking down 2 huge three-pointers for the Mavericks, who are now 48-30 on the season, and now a season high 18 games above 500. Ladies and gentlemen, the Dallas Mavericks are 14-2 in their last 16 games. That is the best record in the NBA in the last 16 games as the Mavericks continue to win in a variety of ways, this time using their biggest comeback of the season, their most unlikeliest comeback of the season, to get it done at home over a Rockets team that's now officially eliminated from play-in and playoff contention. With the Mavericks win over the Houston Rockets, the top 10 teams in the Western Conference are set as we move toward the NBA playoffs. The question now is, where will these teams finish up as we finish out the final 4 or 5 games of the regular season for all of these teams in the West? But for the Mavericks, they move one step closer to locking in a top 6 spot in the West. They had already gotten the tiebreaker over the Phoenix Suns. They already owned the tiebreaker over the New Orleans Pelicans by virtue of having a better division record, already ahead of the Sacramento Kings, as well as they were able to, of course, win the final 2 games of their season series on the road in Sacramento to even up their season series at 2. The Mavericks have put themselves in position with a number of tiebreakers and, more importantly, continuing to win ball games at an incredible rate. And in this game, they were able to overcome what was a really poor start in this game against the Houston Rockets. In fact, Houston jumped out to a 24-5 lead to start the game, including a 15-0 run to get them that early 19-point lead. And it looked like the Mavericks were just sleepwalking in that first quarter. Jalen Green was really good for them, having 15 points in that first quarter, as he was really able to set the tone from a scoring standpoint for the Houston Rockets. You saw what they were able to do and knocking down three-pointers. Dylan Brooks, who had a good game as well with 29 points. He and Jalen Green combined for 21 points in that first quarter, as they were able to shoot nearly 46% from 3 and over 60% from the field in that first quarter. The Mavericks were outscored in that first 6 minutes by 19, 24-5. And for the Mavericks, it looked like it was going to be a long day for them as they were down by 15 at the end of one. They were able to outscore Houston 22-18 over the final 6 minutes of the first quarter. We saw Amen Thompson get thrown out of the game. He got a flagrant 2 for putting a forearm shiver into the throat of Maxi Kleber. That came with 4:15 to play in that first quarter, and it kind of woke the Mavericks up a little bit, but at the same time, they were still down by 15 at the end of one based off of what they were able to do. And Luka Doncic, who had 9 points for the Mavericks, got out to an extremely slow start, turning the ball over way too much. You go back to that first quarter, the Mavericks turned the ball over 8 times in that first quarter, leading to 8 Houston Rockets points. And that felt like that was going to be the theme of the day. The Mavericks' inability to protect the ball, not able to knock down shots, and allowing the Houston Rockets to really be able to get out in transition, where they score 11 fast break points. And it looked like the Rockets, who had lost 4 straight games coming into the game, against the Mavericks. Of course, the Mavericks a week ago Sunday had ended the Rockets' 11-game winning streak. The Rockets had since then not won a game, still haven't won a game since losing to the Mavericks last week. But it felt like they were able to they were off to obviously a good start and looked like they were going to win today's game against the Dallas Mavericks. But they were down by 15 at the end of one was Dallas. Rockets eventually were able to get the lead all the way up to 22 midway through the second quarter. In fact, they were up 61-39 with 6 minutes left in that second quarter. But the Mavericks, led by Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic, they were able to get things turned around. Luka Doncic had 9 points in that second quarter. Kyrie Irving had 13 as the Mavericks were able to close. This is where I felt the game turned around in the final 6 minutes of that second quarter, outscored the Rockets 27-10 to cut the lead to 5. The Mavericks score on their final 8 possessions of that second quarter to get themselves and the crowd back into the game. Going before the game, it was Luka for MVP day as the Mavericks fans and the MFFLs trying to push the candidacy of Luka Doncic. He didn't hurt his cause with the 37 points that he had in the game against the Rockets, but it was Luka for MVP day trying to push his MVP candidacy going forward for the rest of the year. But Maxi Kleber was able to get his first basket of the game, knocking down a three-pointer, and then Luka and Kyrie were really able to take over in that second quarter as Luka drilled a three-pointer to cut the lead to 16. Then he got another jumper to cut the lead to 11. PJ Washington was able to finish with an alley-oop in transition that got it down to 9. You felt the momentum of the game start to swing toward the Mavericks. And then Luka Doncic was able to help get this team back in it along with Kyrie Irving. He was able to get a nice finger roll that cut the lead to 8 at 71-63 with 46 seconds left. And then Irving hit a three-pointer in transition with 23 seconds left in the first half to get them within 5. And that's when you felt the momentum of the game change. Unfortunately, in the first half, the Mavericks were a -6 in the non-Luka minutes. He played the entirety of the first quarter. And then in the first nearly 5 minutes of the second quarter, the Mavericks were a -6. But once he got back into the game, Jalen Green picked up his 4th foul in the first half. Daniel Gafford was in foul trouble. He picked up his 3rd foul with just 8:41 left in the second quarter. So things early on weren't going the Mavericks' way, but they closed well, and it was their superstars in Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, which continued to be a theme of this game as, of course, we move toward the second half. More on this game and the resiliency that the Mavericks showed in their 22-point comeback win over the Houston Rockets. But before we get there, let's hear a word from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, and let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, as you can see, inside the 97-1 The Freak Studios, after the Mavericks get the 147-136 win over the Houston Rockets, as the Mavericks win 3 straight at home as they finish their final homestand of the season, a perfect 3-0, having now won 3 straight games, as the Mavericks now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, 14-2 in their last 16 games, 48-30, a season high 18 games above 500, using their biggest comeback win of the season to get it done. Kyrie Irving's 19 fourth quarter points and Dante Exum's game-tying three-pointer at the buzzer, sending it into overtime, and then the Mavericks outscoring the Rockets 18-7 in that overtime period to get it done to be able to have the Mavericks win at the AAC. Going into that second half, though, I mentioned a little bit earlier, the Mavericks were able to get back in it. You saw early on in the game, Mavericks got down 24-5. They were down by 15 at the end of one. They were able to use a 27-10 run to be able to get themselves within 5 going into halftime after they got down by as many as 22 points in that second quarter, led by Luka Doncic, led by Kyrie Irving, and the superstar play that they had. And going into the second half, you had felt the momentum shift toward the Mavericks and the way that they were trying to continue to stay in this game. And that is one thing, not necessarily about always X's and O's when it comes to this team. It's about the resiliency, the ability to stay poised in difficult situations and through adversity. You can go through a list of things that the Mavericks have gone through this year, playing more starting lineups than any other team in the NBA, dealing with injuries to their superstars in Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, Derek Lively dealing with injury throughout the course of the year, obviously missing another game with the knee sprain that he's dealing with. Josh Green continuing to be out with the right ankle sprain. Luka Doncic missed the last game against the Golden State Warriors, but the Mavericks were able to find a way to win. And that is starting to be the theme that as I start to look back on this season, however long this season lasts for the Mavericks, was the resiliency that they showed and the poise and the character that they showed throughout the course of the regular season and what that will look like in the playoffs. And it was led by Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, who continues to absolutely dominate in fourth quarters and was that on full display once again in what he did against the Houston Rockets. But before we get there, obviously, in that third quarter, Mavericks down by 5 to begin the second half. Dillon Brooks, who had 29 points in the game, shot the ball really well throughout the course of the game against Dallas, scored the first 8 points of that third for the Rockets as they led by 9 with 9 minutes left to end that third quarter. Mavericks were able to pull it within 4 with 7.5 to go in that third. Then again within 5 at 86-81. Daniel Gafford, who was in foul trouble in the first half, really started to get things going in that third quarter. He and Kyrie combining for 11 of the Mavericks' first 15 third quarter points there. You saw he was able to get an and one, even though he missed the free throw. That helped pull the Mavs within 5. Kyrie Irving then making another three-pointer, pulling them within 4 with 7.5 minutes left in that third quarter. And then Luka Doncic taking it coast to coast, getting the Mavericks within 2. And you continued to feel the momentum shift of the game as it went on. Fast forward, though, the Mavs were down by 2, 100-98 with a minute left in that third quarter after a couple of Luka Doncic free throws. Rockets were doing their best to continue to stave off the momentum wave that was the Mavericks. They closed that third quarter on a 6-0 run to increase their lead to 8 at the end of 3, despite the fact that the Mavericks shot 59% from the field. As Luka Doncic scored 14 points, you saw him put Dillon Brooks on skates, making that step-back three-pointer that cut the Rockets' lead to 2. Tim Hardaway had a big 3 that pulled him within 1 at 94-93 with just under 3:30 left in that third. And then Luka Doncic got a critical and 1, drawing the foul on Dillon Brooks that tied the game at 96. But as I mentioned, the Rockets staved off that momentum wave from the Mavericks to be able to close that third quarter on a 6-0 run. And that's where we stood at the end of 3, where the Rockets were up 106-98. And despite the amount of effort that the Mavericks had shown through the comeback in the second quarter to get them back in the game, and then once again in the third quarter, Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks, who played well, as I mentioned, with Dillon Brooks, Fred VanVleet playing also well in this game, they combined for 17 of the Rockets' 35 third quarter points as the Mavs were down by 8 going into the fourth quarter. But again, the resiliency that we talked about just a second ago, it showed again in that fourth quarter, not letting go of the rope and continuing to stay focused on the task at hand. Because you remember with the Mavericks and what they're trying to do, it's going to be difficult for them to catch the Clippers as far as the 4 seed is concerned. The Clippers had a 21-point comeback as they came back against the Cleveland Cavaliers after being down by 21 at halftime. Paul George hit a jump shot with 7 seconds to go in that game as the Clippers were able to get a win. So the Clippers and the Mavericks are playing at the same time, and you were hoping that you could get some help from Cleveland to be able to knock off the Clippers, to get you within a game, of the 4 spot in the West, to maybe give yourself a chance with 4 games to play, an opportunity to catch the Clippers. It doesn't look like that will happen, likely, given where we are in this stage of the season. But at the same time, the Mavericks, knowing what they're continuing to fight for, which is most importantly finishing in the top 6 of the West, avoiding the play-in, because once you lock in the top 6 spot in the West, you get a week off. You don't have to worry about the play-in, obviously. So the Mavericks, knowing what time it was and what they had to do, continuing to win, they continue with that sense of urgency going into the fourth quarter. Mavs outscored the Rockets 8-4 in the first 3.5 minutes of that fourth quarter as Kyrie Irving hit a jump shot to pull the Mavs within 4 once again at 110-106. And we talked about it just a little bit ago. Fourth quarter, Kai, 19 points in that fourth quarter, at one point scoring 11 straight for the Mavericks to pull them within 2 at 115-113 halfway through that period. That was part of what would be eventually a 15-5 run to tie the game at 115. Kyrie Irving with 13 of those 15 points in that 15-5 run. PJ Washington, his defense once again was spectacular. Gets the block shot on one end, finishes with the layup on the other end. That cut the lead to 8. Kyrie Irving gets the steal on one end and then finishes with his second straight basket. That had cut the lead to 4, as I mentioned, at 110-106. Defense turning into offense, especially in that second half. They gave up, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, 71 points in the first half. In the rest of regulation, they gave up 58 points. So a big turnaround where the Mavericks were able to get things going defensively, especially in that fourth quarter and into overtime. And that's where we always talk about with this team is defense turning into offense, protecting the basketball, but forcing pressure on opposing offenses to be able to generate some easy buckets. And they were able to do so, getting out in transition to be able to finish on the other end after allowing their defense to be able to do so. But it was the Kyrie Irving show in the fourth quarter as the Mavericks continued to lean on him throughout the course of the fourth period to get them within the game and stay within the game. I don't know what was happening with Dillon Brooks in terms of the spin cycle and getting put on skates, but Luka did it to him in the first half. Kyrie did it to him in the second half in that fourth quarter with about 7 minutes left. Kyrie putting Dillon Brooks in the spin cycle with a gorgeous finish at the rim. We know how good Kyrie Irving is at finishing with tough buckets at the rim, was able to do so. And then he was able to tie the game with a nice turnaround fadeaway jumper with 4:41 left in that fourth quarter. And that's where we were, resetting the game after all the effort that the Mavericks had put in to come back in that game. They were able to get the game tied at 115 after Kyrie Irving's exploits. The Mavericks then took a 1-point lead at 121-120 after a couple of Kyrie Irving free throws. That gave him 40 points at that particular point. But then Dillon Brooks knocked down a three-pointer, gave the Rockets the lead back in what was a back-and-forth fourth quarter. And you give the Rockets a lot of credit for playing with the kind of competitive fire and drive that they did. Ime Udoka recently calling out the Rockets for their lack of play and letting go of the rope, especially in the way that they lost to the Miami Heat here recently, as they were trying to continue to keep themselves within striking distance of the Golden State Warriors for the play-in, and it simply didn't happen from there. And that three-pointer from Brooks came with 2:42 left in the fourth quarter. Reggie Bullock, who had a really good game against his former team in the Mavericks, eventually was able to get the Rockets a lead at 128-126 with 58 seconds left. And that's where things obviously got extremely tight. Maxi Kleber missing a three-pointer with 38 seconds left that would have given the Mavericks lead. Then Fred VanVleet making 1 or 2 free throws with 22 seconds left. So at that point in the game, you're thinking the Rockets are possibly going to be able to salt this away to get the upset win on the road over the Mavericks. But at the same time, Rockets were up by 3, 129-126. Kyrie Irving, then he misses a three-pointer that would have tied the game at 129. Jabari Smith, the Mavericks foul, he misses 2 free throws with 8 seconds left. And obviously that set it up. The Mavericks did not have any timeouts left. They pushed the ball. Dante Exum finds himself right there wide open on the right wing. Luka Doncic with a pinpoint perfect pass finds Dante Exum. He knocks it down at the buzzer, and they tie the game at 129. Mavericks scoring 31 points in that fourth quarter to be able to get the game into overtime. And again, where would this team be without Dante Exum? The clutch shooting that we have seen from him time and time again throughout the course of this season, the length and the athleticism that he's provided on the defensive end, him continuing to knock down big shots when the Mavericks need him to. And the Mavericks have continued to encourage Exum that when he's open, take those shots. The Mavericks believe in him and his ability to be able to hit from three, and he did it once again when the Mavericks needed him most, and he was able to get the game tied going into overtime. And for Exum, just another confidence boost for him as he's had a renaissance being able to come back to the NBA, the Mavericks being able to sign him late in the summer, and he has turned into an extremely valuable member of this team. And with the experience and the poise and the shot making, Dante Exum has really turned himself into one of the most important pieces on this team. And you look at some of the wins that they've had throughout the year. If Dante Exum is not there and not playing, the Mavericks would be in a little bit different spot without him. And yet again, he proved his worth and his value with the ability to hit a shot in the clutch, where the Mavericks get another clutch win in the game against the Houston Rockets. And that obviously sent us into overtime. Big shout out, obviously, to Luka Doncic. He hit a three-pointer in the fourth quarter with about just under 2 minutes left in the game. That was his first points of that fourth quarter that gave them a 124-123 lead in that back and forth seesawing fourth quarter there. And then in overtime, the Mavericks simply took over. They outscored the Rockets 18-7 in that overtime period. Kyrie Irving, again, setting the tone for the Mavericks, scoring the first 4 points in overtime as they led 133-131 just a minute into the overtime period. PJ Washington, you want to talk about another guy that is gaining confidence with his three-point shot, did so once again in the overtime period, knocking down 2 huge three-pointers for this team. You give Maxi Kleber credit, had a great block shot on Jalen Green on one end, tipped the pass out to Luka. Then Maxi was able to find PJ Washington for a three-pointer. PJ Washington's confidence continuing to grow on this team. He had the 32-point effort against, of course, the Golden State Warriors, where he was able to help the help the Mavericks get that win there by getting the game-winning bucket with 4 seconds left in that game, and then really sealing it in the game against the Rockets with 8 overtime points, 2 huge three-pointers, including the dagger one that made it 145-136 with just about 30 seconds left to go in overtime. It was just a fantastic performance from PJ to be able to close down the game for the Mavericks. And now they continue this amazing momentum that they have built. This has been one of the best teams in the NBA going back now for 2 months. And I want you to really sink your teeth into that. Think about the last 2 months and what this team has done to put themselves in position where it looks like they're going to be able to get to 50 wins. And for this team to have one of the best defenses in the NBA, unfortunately, you didn't see a lot of that in the game against the Rockets, giving up a $136. But that goes to the point about winning in a variety of ways and being able to find different ways to win night in and night out, even when you're not at your best, especially the way the Mavericks were in the first half, not being able to protect the basketball, seeing the Rockets jump out to a huge lead, but then staying and being poised and focused throughout the course of the game to get themselves in position to win this game. And now we talked about it a little bit earlier, and it goes without saying, the incredible run that they're on to go 14-2 in their last 16 games, playing their best basketball down the stretch, getting contributions from PJ Washington, getting them from Dante Exum, getting them from Derrick Jones Jr., who had 10 big points in this game as well. You go back to the game just a couple of days ago against the Golden State Warriors, Tim Hardaway Jr. making winning plays to help this team win basketball games. Obviously, with Maxi Kleber and his defense down the stretch in the fourth quarter and in overtime. Luka being Luka, Kyrie Irving continuing to come up in the clutch. This is the makings of a DNA of a championship team. And one of my favorite moment after this game, and you saw it as you were watching it as well, the Mavericks gathering up at half court as a team, celebrating this win together because they know that moments like this can galvanize a team toward a potential championship run. And you say, Kevin, don't get over your skis talking about the idea of a championship run. But when you have a team that's playing together for one another, they're playing for each other, and they understand the moment and being able to take advantage and capitalize on those moments, led by two guys, one who's won an NBA championship and hit one of the biggest shots in the history of this league, and Kyrie Irving, and of course Luka Doncic, who's going to be another first team All-NBA selection for the 5th year in a row. He has been to a Western Conference final. These are the moments that teams need to galvanize together to be able to look and be able to pull it together when they need to in moments that will call for it once they get to the playoffs. So in a lot of ways, you can nitpick at what the Mavericks did from a turnover standpoint, turn the ball over way too much. But at the same time, this was a team that was able to get to the free throw line a ton in this game. A lot of foul calls in this game. But the Mavericks adapted to what the referees were doing in this game as the Mavericks went 40 of 45 from the free throw line, nearly 89%. And when you're playing in a game like this, you got to be able to knock down free throws, and they were able to do so in a big-time way. Kyrie Irving going 15 of 17 from the line by himself in this game. So you get a combined 85 points from Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. You get another huge game from Dante Exum with the timely shot making. PJ Washington closing it down in the overtime period. Your defense being able to lock it down in the second half. And more importantly, you continue to win, which is the name of the game as we are now in the month of April, as the Mavericks continue to try and scratch and claw their way to the 4th spot. Again, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, it's going to be difficult to get there, but you're feeling much more comfortable. I'm definitely feeling much more comfortable in the idea that the Mavericks will finish not just in the top 6, but comfortably in the top 6, even with the back-to-back that they've got to play against Charlotte and Miami. This is a team that's moving good to get to the 50-win mark. That I said that going into the second half of the year, if they were able to get to the 48 to 50 win mark, they would find themselves comfortably in the top 6 of the West. That is where we are. And barring some type of collapse over the last 4 games, which I don't anticipate from this team because they've got their eyes focused squarely on what needs to be done, the Mavericks are going to finish in the top 6 of the West. And that is huge to be able to get some rest for Derek Lively, for Josh Green, for Luka Doncic, for Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving playing his 29th consecutive game. Mavericks, of course, now 22-7 in the last 29 games that Kyrie Irving has played in. As I mentioned, with the 29 consecutive games that he has had, the Mavericks are winning in a variety of ways. They're healthy for the most part, which hopefully bodes well for them as we move forward for the rest of the regular season with 4 games to go. And then, of course, as they move toward the NBA playoffs, where it looks like we're going to get the Mavericks and the Clippers, what is it, part 3 at this point? So we will see as the final 4 games unfold. But they'll have the day off on Monday, and then, of course, they get ready to take on Charlotte on Tuesday. Well, they'll see a familiar foe in Grant Williams. And, of course, PJ Washington will make his return to Charlotte for the first time since being traded at the trade deadline. But a gut check win, a gutsy win. Your superstars were just that. You got contributions from your obviously your veteran guys, but also from your role players in what was a fantastic comeback win. Again, their largest comeback win of the season at 22 points. The Mavericks getting the 147-136 win. That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, thank you so much for the support of the Inside the Mavs podcast presented by Aura, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. Make sure you like and comment on the video. Give me a vibe check. Let me know how you're feeling about the Dallas Mavericks and what they were able to do to get this win against the Houston Rockets and how they continue to move forward in the Western Conference as we finish out the final 4 games of the regular season. Again, download and subscribe to Inside the Mavs on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Also, like and comment on the video and subscribe to my channel here at Kevin Gray Sports. Until next time, my name is Kevin Gray, Dallas Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak, only Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. This has been Inside the Mavs. I'll talk to you later. Peace.